The phone rang at 3:47 a.m., and I knew it was bad news. Nobody calls at that hour unless someone's dead or missing. I was right about the missing part. My name is Carl Maxwell. I'm 58 years old, and I spent 28 years as a detective with Portland PD's Financial Crimes Unit. But all that experience couldn't prepare me for the call that would turn my world upside down. Mr. Maxwell, this is Officer Jennifer Park with Portland Police. Your daughter Jenny is missing from her wedding venue. We need you to come down here right away. I threw on clothes and drove through the empty streets, my mind racing. Jenny had called me just 2 days before, excited about the final details. Dad, I can't believe it's finally happening. Wayne's family is so sophisticated, but I think they're starting to accept me. Those were the last words she ever said to me. The wedding venue was chaos, police cars everywhere, guests standing around in their fancy clothes looking confused. Wayne Blackwell, my daughter's fiancé, sat on a bench looking devastated. His mother Patricia stood nearby, perfectly composed despite the circumstances. That should have been my first clue. Officers, you need to understand, Patricia was saying to the lead detective. Jenny has been under tremendous stress. The wedding planning, trying to fit into our family's social circle. My late husband had concerns about her background. I wanted to punch something. Jenny had a college degree and worked as a financial analyst at Northwest Credit Union. Just because we weren't old money like the Blackwells didn't make her unworthy. The investigation went nowhere fast. Jenny's car was in the parking lot, her phone found in the bathroom. No witnesses saw anything. The official theory became that she got cold feet and ran away to start over somewhere new. I knew better. My daughter wouldn't do that. She'd been working extra hours at the credit union to save money for their honeymoon. She'd shown me the airline tickets just a week before. But when I tried to tell the investigators about Jenny's recent concerns about Wayne's family business, they brushed me off. Mr. Maxwell, Detective Torres had said. Ironically, Eddie Torres, my old partner before I retired 4 years earlier. You're too close to this. Let us handle it. But they didn't handle it. After 6 months, the case went cold. The police concluded Jenny had voluntarily disappeared, probably suffering from pre-wedding anxiety. Wayne moved to Seattle, claiming he couldn't bear the memories. Patricia suggested to anyone who'd listen that I had driven Jenny away with my drinking problem, a lie that stuck because I'd battled alcohol after my wife Margaret died of cancer 8 years earlier. The next 4 years were hell. I sold my house because every room reminded me of Jenny, the kitchen where we'd made Sunday breakfast after Margaret died, the garage where I'd taught her to change oil, the backyard where we'd planted roses when she graduated college. I moved into a small apartment and spent my pension on private investigators who all came up empty. Patricia Blackwell's lawyers suggested I was harassing the family when I kept asking questions. Wayne claimed he was keeping Jenny's apartment for when she comes back, but I suspected it was just another way to control the narrative. I started drinking again, not heavily at first, just enough to sleep through the nights when I couldn't stop thinking about what might have happened to her. But it got worse. By year 3, I was barely functional. My few remaining friends stopped calling. My savings account emptied, paying for PIs who found nothing. By 2024, I was barely hanging on. My apartment was a mess, bills piling up, no hope left. I'd accepted that I'd never know what really happened to Jenny. That's when Eddie Torres showed up at my door on a rainy November evening. I didn't recognize him at first. He'd gained weight. His hair was gray, but those eyes were still sharp. Carl, we need to talk about Jenny. Eddie, don't. I can't handle another false lead. I'm barely keeping it together as it is. This isn't a false lead. I've been working this case on my own time for 3 years. Carl, I think I know what happened to her. My heart stopped. What do you mean? Eddie came inside and pulled out a thick folder. After I retired 2 years ago, I started my own PI business, mostly insurance fraud, corporate stuff. But I never forgot about Jenny's case. Something about that Blackwell family always bothered me. He spread documents across my kitchen table. Bank statements, incorporation papers, surveillance photos. Patricia Blackwell isn't just some society lady. She's been running a money laundering operation through her investment company for over a decade. Shell companies, fake transactions, cryptocurrency conversions. They've cleaned about $25 million through real estate and bogus investment schemes. I studied the papers. Even in my deteriorated state, my detective training kicked In. This is sophisticated stuff, Eddie. But what does this have to do with Jenny? Jenny found out. Look at this. He showed me printouts of email records recovered from the credit union's servers. 5 days before the wedding, Jenny sent these messages to her supervisor. She was doing freelance bookkeeping for Wayne's company to earn extra money and noticed discrepancies. Money coming in that didn't match any legitimate business activity. The emails were damning. Jenny had spotted patterns in the financial records that would have exposed the entire operation if she'd reported them to authorities. Irregular deposits, shell company transfers, suspicious cryptocurrency transactions. They couldn't let her talk, Eddie continued, so they made her disappear in a way that wouldn't point back to them. Where is she? My voice came out as a whisper. Is Jenny alive? Eddie met my eyes. I think so. And I think I know where they're keeping her. He pulled out more documents. There's a property management company called Pacific Holdings, registered in Vancouver, Canada. On paper, it looks legitimate. But when I trace the ownership through multiple shell companies, it all leads back to Patricia Blackwell. Canada? They've been smart about this, Carl. Moving her across international borders complicates any investigation. Canadian authorities would need solid evidence of kidnapping to cooperate, and, officially, Jenny's a missing person who left voluntarily. Eddie showed me surveillance photos taken outside a modest apartment building in Vancouver's Kitsilano neighborhood. This building is owned by Pacific Holdings. The property manager is Tony Silva, one of Patricia's enforcers. According to my RCMP contact, there's a woman living in Unit 4B under the name Sarah Coleman. She works part-time for a bookkeeping service that handles accounts for several companies tied to the Blackwell network. The photos showed a woman walking to work, grocery shopping, living what looked like a normal life. But when Eddie enhanced one image, I could see it was Jenny, thinner than before, different haircut, but unmistakably my daughter. They've created a complete false identity for her, Eddie explained. Social insurance number, employment history, even a fake background story about moving from Ontario after a bad divorce. She's been living this life for 4 years, Carl. But why hasn't she tried to contact me? Run away? Eddie's expression darkened. Because they convinced her you're dead. Look at this. He showed me fabricated death certificates, fake obituary clippings, even photoshopped pictures of a funeral. According to the documents, I had died in a car accident 6 months after Jenny disappeared. Supposedly while drunk and driving to another failed PI meeting. They told her you couldn't handle losing her and started drinking heavily. That you died because you gave up. Jenny thinks she killed her father by disappearing. The psychological manipulation was brutal and sophisticated. They'd isolated Jenny completely, made her believe that any attempt to return home would be pointless because everyone she loved was gone. There's more, Eddie continued. My contact says she's been under constant but subtle surveillance. Not imprisoned, but watched. She has a handler who poses as a friend, someone who reinforces the story about your death and reminds her that Wayne has moved on and remarried. I felt rage building in my chest, but also something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. We're getting her back. I was hoping you'd say that. But Carl, this isn't going to be easy. We can't just show up and take her. Legally, she's a Canadian resident living there voluntarily. And if we spook Patricia's people, they could move Jenny or worse. What do you suggest? Eddie spread out a timeline on my kitchen table. We need to build a case that exposes the entire operation. Not just the money laundering, but the kidnapping, fraud, everything. If we can get Canadian authorities and the FBI working together, we can take down the whole network and extract Jenny safely. Over the next 4 months, we worked methodically. Eddie had contacts in both countries, former colleagues who'd moved to federal agencies, RCMP officers he'd met at international conferences, even a prosecutor in Vancouver who specialized in cross-border financial crimes. I got sober, had to. Jenny would need her father back, not some broken drunk. Eddie helped me prepare, teaching me about digital forensics and international financial law. We worked 16-hour days, building an airtight case piece by piece. The breakthrough came when Eddie's IT contact accessed Patricia's encrypted email server. The woman was arrogant enough to document everything. Instructions to handlers, financial transfers, even discussions about what to do if Jenny became problematic. Carl, look at this message from last month. Eddie showed me a printout. Patricia to Tony Silva. The Coleman woman has been asking too many questions about her past. If she becomes a liability, we may need to implement the permanent solution we discussed. That's when we contacted the FBI. Agent Rebecca Foster from the Financial Crimes Division took one look at our evidence and immediately opened a joint task force with Canadian authorities. This is exactly the kind of sophisticated money laundering operation we've been tracking. Your daughter's case could be the key to dismantling a network that's been operating for over a decade. The plan was complex but elegant. While the FBI built their RICO case, Eddie would travel to Vancouver undercover as a consultant for small businesses. His job would be to make contact with Jenny without alerting her handlers. Meanwhile, I worked with Agent Foster to coordinate the takedown. Patricia was planning a major investor presentation to attract new money to her schemes. We would time everything for maximum impact, exposure, arrests, and asset seizures all happening simultaneously across multiple jurisdictions. Your daughter doesn't know the truth about you being alive, Agent Foster warned me. When we make contact, she's going to be in shock. We need to be prepared for her to resist initially. She's been psychologically conditioned to believe that any contact from her past life is dangerous. Eddie left for Vancouver on a Tuesday morning in October 2024. I waited by my phone, sober for the first time in years, hoping that after 4 years of hell, I was finally going to get my daughter back. The first contact attempt failed. Jenny's handler had trained her well. She immediately reported the strange man asking about her past to Tony Silva. But Eddie had anticipated this. Phase 2, he told me during our encrypted call that night. Tomorrow, I'm going to her workplace with documentation that proves you're alive. Eddie's second approach was brilliant. He waited outside the bookkeeping office where Jenny worked and intercepted her during lunch break. Instead of trying to convince her with words, he simply handed her a manila envelope and walked away. Inside that envelope was proof I was alive, recent photos of me outside my apartment, copies of my lease agreement, even a video message Eddie had recorded of me saying her name. But most importantly, he included documentation of the fake death certificates Patricia's people had created. The phone call came that night at 11:30 p.m. After 4 years of silence, I heard my daughter's voice again. Dad? She was crying. Dad, is this real? Are you really alive? Jenny, baby, yes, I'm here. I've been looking for you every single day for 4 years. But they showed me the death certificate, the funeral photos. They said you started drinking again after I disappeared and crashed your car. I thought I killed you. Never, I managed to say through my own tears. Never, sweetheart. That was all fake. Patricia's people created those documents to keep you from trying to come home. The conversation lasted 2 hours. Jenny told me about her life in Vancouver, how they'd convinced her that everyone back home believed she'd abandoned her family, how her handler, a woman named Maria who posed as a concerned friend, regularly reminded her that Wayne had moved on and that returning would only cause more pain for everyone. Dad, I wanted to call so many times, but they said your phone had been disconnected. They showed me newspaper articles about you being bitter and blaming me for ruining the family. I thought staying away was protecting what was left of our family. The psychological manipulation had been comprehensive and cruel. They had isolated her completely while making her feel responsible for the isolation. Jenny, we're going to get you out of there, but we need to be careful. These people are dangerous, and if they realize you know the truth, they might hurt you. Over the next 3 weeks, Jenny became our inside source. She started documenting everything, the financial records. She processed the fake companies she did books for, conversations with her handlers. She even managed to photograph documents that showed the scope of Patricia's operation. The evidence was staggering. Patricia wasn't just laundering money. She was running a sophisticated network that included investment fraud, real estate manipulation, and tax evasion. They'd stolen retirement funds from elderly investors, manipulated property values to inflate insurance claims, and created dozens of shell companies to hide assets. But the most damning evidence was Patricia's own communications. Eddie's IT contact had given us access to encrypted emails that showed the entire conspiracy. Messages about relocating the Maxwell girl permanently and ensuring no loose ends remain made it clear that Jenny's life was in immediate danger. Agent Foster assembled a task force that included FBI Financial Crimes, the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, and the RCMP's Integrated Proceeds of Crime Unit. The plan was to simultaneously raid Blackwell Investment Group's offices in Portland, while Canadian authorities secured Jenny and arrested her handlers. "We only get one shot at this," Agent Foster warned during our final briefing. "Patricia Blackwell has connections throughout the legal system. If we miss anything, if she gets any advance warning, she'll activate contingency plans that could put your daughter at risk." The operation was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in November 2024. While Patricia conducted a major investor presentation to attract new victims to her schemes, federal agents would be preparing to destroy her empire. But 2 days before the operation, something went wrong. Jenny called in a panic at 2 a.m. "Dad, something's happening. Maria came by tonight and said I need to be ready to relocate again. She said there might be people asking questions about my past, and I need to be prepared to move quickly. They suspected something. Maybe our investigation had left traces, or perhaps Patricia's paranoia was finally justified. Either way, we were running out of time. Jenny, listen to me carefully," I said. "Tomorrow morning, you need to go to work like normal. At exactly 10:30 a.m., walk to the coffee shop on the corner of West 4th and Burrard. Eddie will be there waiting. Don't pack anything, don't leave any notes, just go. Dad, what if they're watching? What if they follow me? Agent Foster has RCMP surveillance teams positioned throughout the area. If anyone tries to stop you, they'll intervene immediately." I spent that night awake, staring at the ceiling, knowing that everything depended on the next 12 hours. If the extraction failed, if Patricia's people moved Jenny before we could act, I might lose her forever. At 6 a.m. Pacific time, I got the call from Agent Foster. "Operation Cascade is a go. Portland teams are in position. Vancouver extraction team is ready. Carl, in 4 hours, you're either going to have your daughter back or we're going to have a very different problem to solve." I drove to the FBI field office where they'd set up a command center. Multiple screens showed surveillance feeds from both Portland and Vancouver. I watched Patricia arrive at her office building, completely unaware that her world was about to collapse. At 10:25 a.m., I saw Jenny leave her office building and start walking toward the coffee shop. 2 blocks behind her, a black sedan was following slowly. "We have a tail," the RCMP coordinator announced, moving to intercept. My heart stopped. After 4 years of searching, everything was coming down to the next 5 minutes. The RCMP surveillance team moved fast. 2 unmarked cars boxed in the black sedan, while Jenny continued walking, unaware of the drama unfolding behind her. Through the command center speakers, I heard the radio chatter as Canadian officers arrested Tony Silva and another man I didn't recognize. "Subjects in custody," the RCMP coordinator announced. "Extraction proceeding as planned." I watched the screen as Jenny reached the coffee shop. Eddie was there waiting, exactly as planned. Even from the surveillance camera angle, I could see her relief when she spotted him. They talked briefly, then walked to a waiting car driven by an RCMP officer. "Vancouver extraction successful," Agent Foster announced. "Your daughter is safe, Carl. She's en route to the consulate for processing." While I was processing that Jenny was finally safe, the Portland operation kicked into high gear. Patricia was in the middle of her investor presentation when FBI agents entered the Blackwell Investment Group offices. I watched on the surveillance feed as she tried to maintain her composure, while federal agents served warrants and began seizing computers. "Ladies and gentlemen," Patricia announced to her confused investors, "there seems to be some kind of misunderstanding. Please remain calm while I sort this out with these officers." But there was no misunderstanding. Agent Foster and her team had 18 months of evidence, financial records, encrypted communications, and now Jenny's first-hand testimony about the kidnapping and psychological manipulation. The takedown was thorough and professional. Within 2 hours, agents had arrested 12 people across 3 states. Patricia herself was arrested in front of news cameras, her perfectly composed facade finally cracking when she realized the scope of the evidence against her. Wayne was picked up at his Seattle office that same afternoon. Unlike his mother, he immediately asked for a lawyer and started cooperating. It turned out he'd been living with guilt for 4 years, knowing his mother had done something to Jenny, but too afraid and financially dependent to act. "I thought she'd just paid Jenny to disappear," he told investigators during his initial interview. "Mother said Jenny took money and agreed to start over somewhere else. I wanted to believe it because the alternative was too horrible. The financial crimes were staggering. Patricia's network had stolen $18 million from elderly investors, manipulated property values to inflate insurance claims, and created 47 shell companies to hide assets. But the psychological torture they'd inflicted on Jenny was what made me angriest. 2 days after the arrests, Jenny and I were finally reunited at the FBI field office in Portland. She was thinner than I remembered, her hair different. But when she saw me, she ran into my arms like she was 10 years old again. We held each other and cried for what felt like hours. 4 years of grief, guilt, and manipulation melted away in that moment. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I'm sorry I believed them. I'm sorry I didn't try harder to find out the truth." "Don't you dare apologize," I said. "You survived 4 years of systematic psychological abuse. You stayed strong, and when the chance came, you helped us bring them down. I'm proud of you." The trials took almost a year. Patricia got 35 years federal prison for kidnapping, conspiracy, money laundering, and fraud. The judge specifically mentioned the cruel and sophisticated psychological torture of Jenny as an aggravating factor in sentencing. Wayne got 8 years with cooperation credit. During his sentencing hearing, he looked directly at Jenny and said, "I should have protected you. I should have been brave enough to stand up to my mother. I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I failed you." Jenny surprised everyone, including me, when she asked to address the court during his sentencing. "Your Honor," she said, "Wayne Blackwell is not the same person as his mother. He was manipulated too, just in a different way. I don't forgive what happened, but I understand that sometimes people make terrible choices when they're afraid." 12 others in Patricia's network received sentences ranging from 3 to 15 years. The government seized $18 million in assets, which was distributed among the victims of the various schemes. But none of that legal victory mattered, as much as the quiet moments afterward. Jenny and I bought a small house in northeast Portland with some of the victim restitution money. It had a yard where we could plant roses like the ones we'd had before. The recovery wasn't easy. Jenny needed therapy to deal with 4 years of psychological manipulation and isolation. I needed therapy too, to process my own grief and guilt about the drinking that had nearly cost me everything. We both had to learn how to be a family again. Jenny had spent 4 years believing she was responsible for destroying our family, while I'd spent 4 years believing I'd failed to protect her. Working through that guilt together took time and professional help. Jenny went back to financial analysis, but now she works with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, helping investigate cases similar to what happened to us. Her first-hand experience with sophisticated fraud makes her invaluable in understanding how these operations manipulate victims. I do consulting, work for the Financial Crimes Unit, using my detective experience to train younger agents about long-term investigations and victim psychology. Eddie and I started a private investigation firm that specializes in missing persons cases involving financial crimes. It's been 18 months since we got Jenny back. We have dinner together twice a week, and she calls me every morning at 8 a.m. Not because she has to, but because 4 years of thinking I was dead taught her not to take our relationship for granted. Some people ask me how I never gave up hope during those 4 years. The truth is, I did give up many times. I got drunk, I got depressed, I wanted to quit. But every time I was ready to surrender, I remembered something Margaret told me when she was dying. She's all we have left of each other. Jenny was my connection to the woman I loved and lost. Losing Jenny would have meant losing the last piece of Margaret too. Patricia Blackwell thought she could outsmart a broken-down ex-detective, with drinking problems and no resources. She was wrong about one thing. I wasn't broken down. I was broken, yes, but I was still a father, and I was still a detective. She never had a chance against both. Those roses we planted last spring are blooming now. Every morning when I see them, I'm reminded that sometimes the most important cases take years to solve, but justice has its own timeline. And sometimes love really is stronger than money, power, and even the most sophisticated criminal conspiracy. If you remember nothing else from my story, remember this. Never underestimate what a father will do to save his child, and never believe that money and power can defeat love and professional persistence working together. Because in the end, the most sophisticated criminals always make the same mistake. They think broken people stay broken, but sometimes we're just gathering strength for the fight that matters most.